Will India hold simultaneous polls at the state and central levels in the future? That's the million-dollar question in the minds of policymakers. Such an exercise will be unprecedented in size and execution. But will it also have a major socio-economic impact? We find out in our next report.
One nation, one poll is the talk of the town. But holding a single election across India faces demographic and geographic challenges. However, India is no stranger to simultaneous polls. Polling for the state assemblies and parliament took place simultaneously between 1952 and 1967. But did such an electoral setup have any economic impact? Media reports suggest that there are no solid macroeconomic data from 1952 to 1962. However, a report by ex-Finance Commission Chief N.K. Singh and economist Prachi Mishra has some answers. Their report tracks economic data after 1962 and includes years where 40% or more states went for simultaneous polls. The report considers the 1962, 1967, 1977, 1980 and 1984 polls and also looks at economic data from 2 years before and after the election years. So, what do their findings suggest? A 1.5 percentage points addition to GDP growth from the pre-election to post-election period when simultaneous polls were held. The report finds that public spendings was higher after simultaneous elections. Capital expenditure too increased in the same period. The report also finds higher investments in the period around simultaneous election years. A major argument in favor of one nation, one poll is that multiple polls reduce economic activities and induce policy paralysis. However, many argue that multiple poll cycles work as a feedback mechanism for several socio-economic policies across India. Holding just one poll across India, they argue, will disrupt the mechanism and weaken the possibility of course corrections. The jury is yet to be out on the matter, but its impact on India's political economy will be watched very closely. Bureau Report WION World is One.
And for more on this, we are now being joined by Professor Vikas Singh, who is an economist and an author, and he's joining us live from Hyderabad. Thanks for joining us on the show, Professor Singh. Well, my first question to you is, with varying arguments coming in for and against simultaneous elections, do you see any correlation between election cycles and economic growths?
There's certainly, though not enough data is available to really go one way or the other. But my belief is that the GDP growth can go up by about 1 to 1.5% based on cost cutting in the election process, based on the fact that several elections mean loss of governance. Most of the political parties are in the election mode, which affects the governance in many ways. So there are huge advantages. Other than that, there's also the cost that the government incurs in holding election. A study says that the first election cost the government of India only 11 crores, but the election expenses has gone up by about 350 to 400 times in the last 75 years alone. But that's a minimal, that's not a huge cost compared to the kind of population we have. The bigger cost is that most of the time the political parties throughout the year, throughout the 5-year cycle, are in election mode, going from the parliament election to the state elections to the elections at the panchayat level and the municipality levels. So the governance suffers. And the cost of governance is the bigger cost, not the cost of only holding the election. It also paralyzes several schemes that the government would like to launch. It paralyzes several investments that the government would like to make. And any delay in this has a huge bearing on the development of the economy. So there is certainly a huge cost with relation to holding frequent elections. In one way, I think one nation, one election is a good idea. The time has come. But having said that, I think the government and particularly the Prime Minister must also realize and understand that this is going to have several challenges. I think the main challenge is how do we really take away the concern of the political parties at the regional level, especially the regional political parties who have and who really cater to the needs of the local population or the regional issues. What needs to be done and how it needs to be addressed is going to be the test for this idea to be implemented.
Okay, while you speak about the costs that are incurred, with multiple poll cycles, however, an argument in favor of it is that they do work as a feedback mechanism on government policies. What is your thoughts on that?
I think there's a merit in what you're saying, that there is frequent elections mean that the government, several governments get the feedback and people have a chance to vote out a government that's not done well. For example, if the BJP government is in power at the center, but at the state level, if they believe that it's not done well, they can vote out the BJP government and select a regional government. That's given. I think the bigger challenge in implementing this is what do we really do with the regional political parties who feel that they're going to be squeezed by having an election process which caters to the national issues. Their whole identity is going to be disturbed. For example, several regional parties cater to the needs at the regional level. When one nation, one election is implemented, they will be squeezed out because people will be voting for the national parties, which are basically two national parties in this country. So that's a concern that they have, and I think that concern is genuine, and it needs to be addressed. One way it can be addressed is that the electoral process must ensure that the regional parties could get a mandated number of hours of media coverage. It could also be possible to ensure that during certain phases of the election, for example, regional issues are discussed. For example, if you have a 1 month long election process, maybe 15 days in that period, only regional issues can be discussed, can be brought out, so that the people, the voters, can also understand that this party stands for this and the other party stands for something else. So these are some of the solutions to this. But I think the whole thing, the whole crux of the issue is that I think it needs to be communicated well to the public at large. It can't just be thrust upon them. So there's a long ropeway, there's a long path that the government needs to take to ensure that people are taken in, their views are heard, and then implement this. Implementing without a wider discussion, in my view, is not a great idea.
Professor Singh, you've provided us a very sensible take on how solutions can be provided for those who counter the argument of simultaneous polls. However, I will now take off from my previous question to you. How can simultaneous polls resolve the issue of policy paralysis in India?
As I mentioned earlier, I think most of the political parties are continuously in political mode. For example, on average, close to about 2 or 3 elections take place every year. Now, if you look at, just an example, next year, Maharashtra is going to the polls. The entire energy of the central government will be focused on, wooing the voters. That's one. The second thing is that during the election phase of about 1 month, there can be absolutely no new announcement on development issues. That's a big challenge because, if we have elections around the year, you can't announce any developmental initiatives, and that has a huge cost. The cost is not only in terms of money, but also in terms of time. The entire energy of the administrative machinery goes into holding elections. The governance suffers. So there is certainly a huge cost in having frequent elections. Other than that, the other challenge is that most of the time the parties are playing to the gallery. They want to announce freebies. They want to announce something that can provide them electoral advantages. And these are some of the issues that needs to be taken away from the electoral process, because elections should be won on developmental issues, not on something that can be provided for the short term, or that can be provided as an incentive for people to be voted back to power. So holding one election has certainly advantages, because it can ensure that the election is fought on developmental issues.
Okay. Professor Singh, thank you so much for providing us with a broader view of this issue of simultaneous polling, and thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.